Diocletian, as being of a timorous disposition, was a searcher into futurity, and during his abode in the East he began to slay victims, that from their livers he might obtain a prognostic of events. And while he sacrificed, some attendants of his who were Christians stood by, and they put the immortal sign on their forehead. At this the demons were chased away, and the holy rites interrupted. The soothsayers trembled, unable to investigate the wanted marks on the entrails of the victims. They frequently repeated the sacrifices, as if the former had been unpropitious, but the victims, slain from time to time, afforded no tokens for divination. At length Tages, the chief of the soothsayers, either from guess or from his own observation, said, "There are profane persons here who obstruct the rites." Then Diocletian, in a furious passion, ordered not only all who were assisting at the holy ceremonies, but also all who resided within the palace to sacrifice, and in case of their refusal to be scourged. And further, by letters to the commanding officers, he enjoined that all soldiers should be forced to the like impiety, under pain of being dismissed from the service. After an interval of some time, he went to winter in Bithynia, and presently Galerius Caesar came thither, inflamed with furious resentment, and purposing to excite the inconsiderate old man to carry on that persecution which he had begun against the Christians. I have learned that the cause of his fury was as follows. The mother of Galerius, a woman exceedingly superstitious, was a votary of the gods of the mountains. Being of such a character, she made sacrifices almost every day, and she feasted her servants on the meat offered to idols. But the Christians of her family would not partake of these entertainments, and while she feasted with the Gentiles, they continued in fasting and prayer. On this account she conceived ill will against the Christians, and by woman-like complaints instigated her son, no less superstitious than herself, to destroy them. So during the whole winter, Diocletian and Galerius held councils together, at which no one else assisted, and it was the universal opinion that their conferences respected the most momentous affairs of the empire. The old man long opposed the fury of Galerius, and showed how pernicious it would be to raise disturbances throughout the world, and to shed so much blood, saying that the Christians were wont with eagerness to meet death, and that it would be enough for him to exclude persons of that religion from the court and the army. Yet he could not restrain the madness of that obstinate man. He resolved therefore to take the opinion of his friends. Now this was a circumstance in the bad disposition of Diocletian, that whenever he determined to do good, he did it without advice, so that the praise might be all his own. But whenever he determined to do ill, which he was sensible would be blamed, he called in many advisers, so that his own fault might be imputed to other men. And therefore a few civil magistrates and a few military commanders were admitted to give their counsel, and the question was put to them according to priority of rank. Some, through personal ill will towards the Christians, were of the opinion that they ought to be cut off as enemies of the gods and adversaries of the established religious ceremonies. Others thought differently, but having understood the will of Galerius, they, either from dread of displeasing or from desire of gratifying him, concurred in the opinion given against the Christians. Yet not even then could the emperor be prevailed upon to yield his assent. He determined above all to consult his gods, and to that end he dispatched a soothsayer to inquire of the Apollo of Miletus, whose answer was such as might be expected from an enemy of the divine religion. So Diocletian was drawn over from his purpose, but although he could struggle no longer against his friends, and against Caesar and Apollo, yet he still attempted to observe such moderation as to command the business to be carried through without bloodshed, whereas Galerius would have had all persons burnt alive who refused to sacrifice. A fit and auspicious day was sought out for the accomplishment of this undertaking, and the festival of the god Terminus, celebrated on the 7s of the calends of March, was chosen in preference to all others to terminate, as it were, the Christian religion. That day the harbinger of death arose, first cause of ill and long-enduring woes, which befell not only the Christians but the whole earth. When that day dawned, in the 8th consulship of Diocletian and the 7th of Maximian, suddenly, while it was yet hardly light, the prefect, together with the chief commanders, tribunes, and officers of the treasury, came to the church in Nicomedia, and the gates having been forced open, they searched everywhere for an image of the divinity. The books of the Holy Scriptures were found, and they were committed to the flames. The utensils and furniture of the church were abandoned to pillage. All was rapine, confusion, and tumult. That church, situated on rising ground, was within view of the palace, and Diocletian and Galerius stood, as if on a watchtower, disputing long whether it ought to be set on fire. The sentiment of Diocletian prevailed, who dreaded lest so great a fire being once kindled, some part of the city might be burnt, for there were many large buildings that surrounded the church. Then the Praetorian guards came in battle array with axes and other iron instruments, and having been let loose everywhere, they in a few hours leveled that lofty edifice with the ground. The next day an edict was published, depriving the Christians of all honors and dignities, ordaining also that without any distinction of rank or degree they should be subjected to tortures, and that every suit at law should be received against them, while on the other hand they were debarred from being plaintiffs in questions of wrong, adultery, or theft, and finally that they should neither be able to live in freedom nor have any voice. A certain person tore down this edict and cut it in pieces, improperly indeed, but with high spirit, saying, in scorn, "These are the triumphs of the Goths and the Sarmatians." Having been instantly seized and brought to judgment, he was not only tortured but roasted alive in the forms of law, and having displayed admirable patience under sufferings, he was consumed to ashes.